Well, good morning. It's nice to see you. All of us here as we gather to worship and enjoy the day. How many of you know what an AP class is when you're in high school and college, I suppose? Advanced placement. Goes to those students who are maybe a little smarter than the others, a little more, industrious than some others, and you get a chance to go a little bit deeper, get a little higher grade point. AP classes were just getting started when I was in elementary school. I was in 7th grade. Our elementary system went through 7th, and then middle school started at 8th. And they were just beginning this program. We had 6 classes when I was in elementary school. And I kind of rotated around among them. There was one class that was kind of the accelerated kids. And then the rest of us were sprinkled around. Well, I got a little smarter when I hit about 4th grade. And in the 5th grade, I went to the accelerated class. But I wasn't quite that good in 6th grade, so 5th grade, so they moved me back to the 6th grade class, but I did pretty good in 6th grade, so they moved me back to the accelerated class in 7th grade. All that's to say, near the end of the spring term, the principal made an announcement in our class that AP classes were available, and he read off the names of all the ones who were chosen to be in the AP class when they went on to middle school. Had a big reception a few days later for all of our parents, only my name wasn't called. Like 30 kids in the class. He calls off all the names, and all the names of all the kids are going except Roger and Andy McGregor. Andy sat up on the front row over here, and I sat kind of near the back row over here, and we didn't get selected. Now, can you imagine the feeling in that afternoon as all the kids went to meet their parents in the auditorium, and Andy and I sat there with Mrs. Coleman guarding us, having to be there with us. We didn't make it. I didn't know how to think about that. About 2 weeks later, Andy and I were sent to the principal's office, where he informed us that they decided to include Andy and I in the AP classes as well. I guess I wasn't all that smart. My 10-year family reunion, George Purvis said to me, we all figured you weren't as smart as we are, but you worked harder. I didn't know whether to like that, quite or not. Well, I finally got in the AP classes, and about 40 years later, my mom's in the nursing home, and there's Miss Crosley. They eat lunch every day. Miss Crosley was the math teacher. And we began reminiscing. And she got to talking about how much she loved Andy McGregor, who lived right next door, and how Andy got left out of the AP classes. So she went to the principal and argued that Andy ought to be in it. And they decided if they're going to take Andy, they had to take Roger. And that's how I got in the AP classes. It's a perfect illustration, of course, of the grace gospel of Jesus Christ as opposed to the performance-based religion that a lot of us try to live out to find acceptance with God. I had nothing to do with my performance. It was just Miss Crosley. And I got in because of Miss Crosley. And I have forever been grateful to her for that. Now, I want to contrast that. It's a picture of grace with a picture of what you and I might call legalism. James Bryant Smith tells of a woman who called him one day in his office. He was pastoring, and she said, can I go to your church? And he thought that was a rather strange request. He said, well, why do you ask that? Of course you can come to our church. She said, well, don't answer too soon. She said, I want you to listen to my story. Well, her story was that she'd had an illegitimate child when she was a junior in high school. She said to the pastor, the father didn't want a thing to do with me or the baby. I considered an abortion, but finally decided not. And a few years ago, I went to my pastor that I'd had since childhood, and I said, it might be good if you'd let me. I'll speak to all the high school girls about the dangers of sex and dating. And he said, I'd never allow that in our church, said he, because you're the kind of person who might rub off on them. Now, that was kind of painful. But she still liked her childhood church, so she continued to go. And she said, I finally began to get my life in a position where I wanted to kind of straighten up and get back right with God. I decided I wanted my child baptized. So I went to my pastor and asked to be have my child baptized, and he said, not in my church. I'd never baptized an illegitimate child. Now, that's what's called legalism. What are we seeing here? She didn't measure up. She didn't measure up to God, didn't measure up to Christ, so she can't come in. That's legalism. How many of you grew up in a church that was something like that? A whole slew of us. I did. My pastor was rather legalistic about what we could do and what we couldn't do. Now, we learn this performance-based stuff very early on when we're children. We learn it at home. If we do what our parents like, then and obey them and do good things, they like that. If we don't do things that are so good and we disobey them, they don't like that. We begin to learn that our acceptance comes along with how we behave. You're in a teacher-parent conference when you're in high school or elementary school, and you can hardly wait for mom to come home or dad to come home. How'd we do? Oh, the teacher was so proud of you. And you get these kudos that says, you know, the way I make my mom and dad like me and be proud of me is to work really hard. But you didn't want to be the child that came home. Well, says mom, you're not doing very well. You got some failing grades. You better get it together, son. I'm not pleased with this. And what are we learning? So if we don't perform well, then they don't affirm us. They don't accept us. In our culture, if you're beautiful, handsome, you get accepted by that. But if you're not beautiful or handsome, you can be kind of rejected. You make the winning goal in soccer game and soccer match, and man, your mom and dad and all the kids are excited with you, but if you should have stopped the goal and it slinks by you, wow, they're not too impressed with you. You get criticized. Why didn't you catch it? Why didn't you do better? You lost the game. You see, in other words, now here's the point. Many of us still think that God likes us or doesn't like us depending on how we behave. See, that was the legalistic pastor. She's not good enough. She'd stay in the church. Let's keep those people out of here. She hadn't performed well. You know, if you ask the average person, what does it do to get right with God? Many in a clear-cut answer would say, well, I get right with God if I go to church, read my Bible, give some money, help some people, stop sinning. That is exactly the opposite, upside down opposite. See, that's performance-based legalism, but many of us still live there. We're still trying to make God like us, and if we do something wrong, we feel like God doesn't like us. As opposed to total grace. Thank you, Miss Crosley. I wasn't good enough. You snuck me in the door. Now, for many of us, that's our narrative. That's how we view life. That's how we view our Christianity. But thank God, that's not how He sees it. And I think for a lot of us, it's time to come to grips with the beautiful heart of God that welcomes us, and He's not waiting to see how we perform before He lets us in or not. For example, quick story. You know the story of the prodigal son. If you don't, I'll summarize it real quickly. Prodigal son, his story was grace-based, older brother, and we don't talk much about the older brother, so I want to make my point with him in a second. But you know the story, the young man says to Dad, wish you were dead, because I want my inheritance now. But since you're not dead, can I have my inheritance anyway? How does that make Dad feel? Okay, son, take it. So he goes off, and you know the story, riotous living, drunk times, shooting drugs, I'm sure, all kinds of prostitutes. He ends up penniless, slopping pigs. Remember the prodigal son says, oh, even my servants eat better than I do. I'm going to go home. Maybe my daddy will treat me like a servant. Now, what do you think he's thinking when he goes home? Got that long walk. He's thinking, I'm going to come face to face with Dad. What do you think Dad's going to say? I'm so disappointed in you. I knew this would happen. Where you been? Where'd you spend all the money? What kind of friends were you keeping? Isn't that what many of our dads might say? You know, if we'd gone off and spent our inheritance. That's what he thought his dad would say. But you know that's not what happened at all. Dad was sitting on the porch, just rocking in his chair, and he sees the boy. Leaps up, runs towards him, arms open, and he welcomes him home. Somebody hey, let's don't give him pig slop. Get the best fatted calf we have. We're going to have a party. He was lost, now he's found. He's so excited. Now, that's grace. He didn't deserve any of that, did he? None of it. What he deserved to do was be kicked into the slop pig, but he didn't. He get total grace. Now, the older brother, remember what it said? He got really angry. Why did he get angry? Because he was getting a free ride, that younger brother. And all this time he'd been what? Performing. Daddy, I planted the seeds. I watered the plants. I harvested the crops. And you do that for the guy who doesn't do anything? What's he thinking? We approach our Father by our performance. And what Jesus says is no. God doesn't like us or not like us based on how we behave. When I was in high school, my senior year, I broke curfew. Curfew was midnight, and after one ball game one night, I, with my friends, stayed out till about 2:30 in the morning. But I wasn't worried because I knew Mom and Dad would be asleep. Drove home, thinking to myself, I'll take my shoes off like in the cartoons. I'll tippy-toe down in my socks. I did just where the boards were that squeaked in the hallway. She'll never know. So I tippy-toed down the hallway, got my jammies on, got in bed, smiled at my deception, and all of a sudden I felt this presence hovering over my face. And I opened my eyes, it's my mom. And here's what she says. You'll never know how disappointed I am in you. Boy, she could have hit a baseball bat over my head, couldn't she? Would have hurt worse than that. Now here's the point. Is that what Jesus would have said? Would Jesus have said that to me? Now, he said that to the religious leaders. But to the average one of us, just, normal people, would he have said that to the prostitutes who came to him? No. What did he say? Let's go have a party. Let's go to Matthew's house. Matthew, follow me. And where does Jesus leads the way, and he leads to Matthew's house. And what Jesus does for these sinners, quote unquote, prostitutes, tax collectors, cheaters, thieves, is he doesn't look over at these guys and say, I am so disappointed in all of you. Shape it up. That is not Jesus. The Jesus of the Bible says, come on, let's have a party. Because you were lost and now you're found. Let's have a party. You start reading the Gospels and looking at the life of Jesus from a little less legalistic viewpoint, and you begin to feel like, when push comes to shove, Jesus is kind of fond of sinners. Matthew says, maybe like this, I think these tax collectors and publicans and me and these prostitutes are his favorite kind of people. He'd a lot rather spend time with us than those self-righteous legalists who are trying to make us perform to find God's acceptance. Much rather spend time with Jesus. I did something really nasty in high school. I was kind of legalistic because, my pastor made it very clear to us that, things like Baptists, Southern Baptists, were the only ones who'd go to heaven. See, Methodists were going to hell. Catholics were sure to go to hell. The Episcopalians were going to hell. And unless they had a personal relationship with Christ, when they walked down the aisle of a church and said, I believe in Jesus, and got baptized, then they were going to hell. That's why we Southern Baptists had such a giant world to save, because everybody was lost. That was my tradition growing up in my childhood church. One of my friends, who soon became one of my not friends in the spring of the year, Mom and Dad were going through a divorce. His dad was a pastor. And what else is a legalistically trained preacher to say at my young age but something like that? If your dad and mom had been Southern Baptists, they wouldn't have this problem. Is that the epitome of a legalist? What did he need? Comfort, encouragement, an arm around him. He was hurting so deeply. What did I give him? Judgment, condemnation, rejection. And legalists do that to others. And many of us do that to ourselves. I'm such a bad person. God couldn't like me. I bet he's disappointed in me. He's always watching me. I'm never measuring up. And the whole point is, it's time to stop all that. God does not accept us or not based on performance. Paul talks about, and just remember these words, position and condition. Our position in Christ is in the heavenlies. The Bible says as soon as we receive Christ, we are seated with Christ in the heavenlies at the right hand of the Father, of Jesus. That's our position. Right now, he looks at us as if we were already there. It's his futuristic looking. But we're not there yet. We're still down here sinning. This is our condition. And what he's going to do with us is work in our condition with all my sins to move me to a position in the heavenly glories where I'm already seated. And he looks at us not as we are now. He looks at us as we will be one day when we are in heaven with him. That's how he treats us. Oh, he doesn't like me enough. He's not looking at my condition, says Paul. He's looking at my position. And that's total grace. Does that make sense? Now, as performance-based people who've grown up with performance, it's okay to take a look at this and kind of rethink this and realize that according to position and condition, he's not looking at our behaviors right now as Christ followers. Oh, he's got to do a little spanking here and there along the way. But he's looking at us as what he already sees us to be when one day we walk into heaven's glory. Now, all that part of the sermon is just to put a little basis for the fact that we would all agree with this. Boy, I sure would like Jesus to like me no matter how I behaved. Isn't that true? Sure. Because when he accepts us, we have a relationship, we have an intimacy, we've got a strength, we've got a Lord Jesus Christ and the Spirit of God who live within us to indwell us, to move us onto the spiritual life. And for those of us who know Christ, it just doesn't get any better than that. But a lot of us aren't experiencing that in our condition. And we'd like to draw near, but we're having trouble drawing near. And so what I'd like to do for the next few moments is just step back a bit and say, why don't we unplug for a minute? Because there's nothing wrong with being plugged in. It's just that it's hard to hear God speak when we're still plugged in. So many distractions that come to us and so many opportunities for other things than quietly listening to God's voice that we oftentimes miss the relationship because we're still too plugged in. They've got a new sociological term for people who use their gadgets too often. Nothing wrong with a droid, an Android, nothing wrong with an iPhone, or an whatever, or messaging or texting. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But sometimes it's okay to unplug it for a while. You see, the popcorn brain they're discovering are people who use their gadgets all the time, and after a while they've so trained their brains they can't turn them off very well. There's a lot of research now going into children who have grown up with the TV as their babysitter and all their texting stuff, and their ADD in school. They're calling it the popcorn brain. What's popcorn do? Pop, 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 pop. You ever watched it? And pop, 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 pop. And the little brain's going all over the place. We've trained them to pop to all of our gadgets. Again, nothing wrong with a gadget. Just got to be kind of careful. I love my gadget. That's not true. I hate this phone. I want to go back to just a phone someday. Just a simple phone. But that's okay. I like to text and do messages on it. But isn't it, it's so hard to turn this off? Have you noticed? I leave it on because Julie might call, because the kids might call. The president of the U.S. might call. You don't know who's going to call you here. You got to leave this thing on. And it buzzes and bells and dings and rings, and I'll stop whatever I'm doing because I'm a slave to this thing. It's just so easy to be a slave to it. The average adult now spends 2.5 hours a day watching television and being online. Do you know the average teenager texting, messaging, talking on the phone spends an average of 16 hours a day on their gadgets? Can you believe that? Well, don't. It's not true. I just made that up. But if you've got teenagers, it seems like they're on their 16 hours a day, doesn't it? Sure. And it's okay. I'm not knocking at all being plugged in. I'm just encouraging us to know if we really want to come to know God's heart along this way and get some special things done, we need to unplug for a little bit. Let me show you why. Jesus spent a lot of time unplugging. Before he begins the very first part of his ministry, he unplugs and he goes out into the wilderness. And he's learning. What's he learning there? who he is, what kind of life he's going to live, what kind of mission he's going to have. And a lot of us are wondering, what should I do? Who am I? What's my life to be? What's my will? What kind of person am I? It's okay to go back and unplug and think about that. A number of years ago, and I'll make this very oblique, I had promised a person in our church some personal things, and 25 years later, it came time to, to make good on my promise, and I didn't want to. Circumstances had changed a lot. But I'd promised, but I didn't want to do it. So he confronted me one day. He said, remember the promise you made? Now, I remembered the promise, but I really didn't want to do it. I was hoping he wouldn't make a big deal of it. He said, remember that promise? I just want a yes or no. Do you remember what you promised me or not? And if I'd said yes, I would have kind of had to, work through it. If I said no, he didn't know if I remembered or not. Give me a yes or no. And I'm not proud. In fact, I've agonized over this. I said to him, I don't remember. He said, well, as he looked me in the eye, I just wanted to know if my pastor would lie to me or not. I deserve that. And this is how I work it. I thought it was time to unplug a little bit because my character was at stake. My integrity was at stake. And I blew it with him. We've cordially talked together, but haven't been friends ever since. I don't want to be that kind of person, and I blew it. So there's times when we blow it like that. Who am I really? See, Jesus ducked away and unplugged to analyze a bit about his character. And that's a good thing to do. He unplugged when it was time to select his disciples. Now watch this. You're getting ready to get married. It's the most important decision you'll ever make. And even as I look out here, I realize one of every two people in this room are going to be divorced sometime in their lifetime. Just look around you. If there's any decision we ought to make that's significant, maybe it's okay to unplug for a while and sit back and maybe do a little praying and fasting and being sure that God's settled with this and we're settled with this before we just, blithely jump into it. I always try to tell couples, please don't get married for at least a year. You need to see him for 12 months. To know if something really screwy is going to come up, So watch them 12. Don't you get married in less than 12 months. You need to unplug. And with wisdom, be sure everything's fine with that. That's what Jesus did. And then he selected his 12. He even picked out one who'd be his betrayer, because that was scriptural and predicted. He unplugged in nights of prayer. I do this occasionally. And I'll recommend it to you. The most special time I ever had, I'll never forget. I was in my doctoral program at Golden Gate Seminary in San Francisco. And the professor said, okay, this assignment this weekend is to go somewhere quiet and spend 5 hours with God and keep a journal. Never spent 5 hours with God. Didn't think I could do it. But man, I was going to give it a shot. Hiked to this beautiful place overlooking the Pacific, the rocks below, the crashing waves. I started my journal 8:04. Started praying. And I prayed and read the Bible, spent some quality time with God, and looked at my clock, and it was 8:32. Going, oh my, that's just about the time, too. I'd never done this. So I tried to pray more, and I read more Bible, and I'd write down what time I did what. And after about literally an hour, I was just tired of this. So I watched the wind and the waves, watched the kids playing. There was a nude beach around the corner. I didn't go over there, but it was literally right around the corner. And I failed. 3 o'clock, I left. And I got an F on the project. But this is something special for me. I've never forgot those moments. I've forgotten a whole lot of assignments I ever got in school. But I've never forgotten the peace and the encouragement and the blessing when I just unplugged long enough to sit and reflect. For some of us, it's been a long time since we've unplugged. And it's okay to unplug. Jesus unplugged when he was tired. He stopped, took a nap in the back of the boat. And then the storm came up. And the storm is raging. And he's been unplugged. He's ready to handle the next task. So he's been unplugged. They wake him up, and what's he do? He does a miracle. Some of us this morning are going through the storms of life. We really need a miracle. Oh, God, please take care of my cancer. Maybe it's time to unplug and really spend some time back there praying about that. Or your teenager's gone screwy. Or you name it. Storms come in all kinds of directions. We just kind of force our way. I think Jesus said, no, it's time to unplug a little bit. You know, Julie just had double eye surgery. Had some muscles in here that had torn loose and took 4-hour surgery. So I didn't realize it was that complex of a deal. And she's kind of been blind for the last week till finally she got the bandages off and she could sort of see. And it was kind of fun to play with her. You know, scare her from behind, go boo, she wouldn't see me coming. And it's just kind of fun stuff, you know, that guys really enjoy. And the doctor told us we had to go walking every day. So we went to the mall, air conditioned. I'd take her arm, I'd lead her, move the people. We'd go all around. Second time went to the mall. Third time went to the mall. About the fourth time, she's starting to see a little bit. So we go to the mall, and she takes the rearview mirror, and she peers in there real carefully. And she says to me, whoa, look at all these big bruises on my face. Did you know I had all these big bruises? Yeah. Well, why didn't you tell me? I said, if I'd told you, we wouldn't have gone for a walk. It was okay. But here's the deal. One of her best prayer partners, named Sandy Wakefield. She and Sandy on the phone for an hour just praying that this surgery is going to work out okay. And they unplugged into that prayer time. And thank God everything's just fine. See, when the storms hit, he rested, then he did a miracle. He unplugged long enough to feel the touch in the midst of the maddening crowd of one little woman who was sick and just needed to stop a little bleeding. He said, wait a minute, somebody touched me. Why? He was unplugged from the crowds for a while. But Jesus, they're pushing, they're shoving. What do you mean somebody touched you? We're all touching you. But he knew. Because he was unplugged from all that. See, one little heart that was hurting. Sometimes when I'm at the mall, I'll sit on a bench and just watch the people walk by. How many of us have done that? Just want to people watch. I play this little game. I pick out one person walking by and I try to imagine what's going on in their life right now. You ever done that? Sure you have. And I'm practicing. When I see that look, I know, oh, there's a hurting heart. Uh-oh. Wow, they just lost a spouse? Those guys are having a great time. Sometimes we unplug long enough just to look around at the people near us. And Jesus unplugged. You know, he took a vacation for 2 weeks, went from Jerusalem to Tyre and Sidon, 2 weeks, just strolled along. He didn't even take his iPhone with him, just nothing. Take a walk. Garden of Gethsemane, he needs to know the Father's will. He needs to have the courage to surrender to the will. Father, not your will, but mine. I'm going to go over here by myself, away from the disciples. I'm going to unplug long enough to hear you speak. And you know, that speaks to many of us who are wondering, what is God's will for my life? Where do I go? Do I want to do it? So we unplug. And we ask those things. And then we come back with something like this. Dear Jesus, would you make your will for my life so clear I just can't miss it? I pray that one a lot. Unplug. And isn't it cool? After all of his life, he comes to the very end. He's hanging on the cross. And does it get any better than this? It is finished. It would be nice to come to the end someday, even of the week, and be able to say the week is finished well. Today has been finished well. So just a thought, and I'll draw this to a close. I've given you in your insert just some things you might try this week to unplug a little bit and do something productive. I'm not going to mention all of those. I just put a jumble of them down as they came to mind. But let me encourage you, first of all, to every day, could you make this commitment? Every day you're going to take 5 minutes, 10 or 15, and just unplug, sit down alone, turn all the phones off, and just do 1 or 2 of these 3 or something else you might like. The goal is to reconnect. Just to unplug from the world a few minutes and reconnect. And we're moving through several spiritual disciplines here that many of you know, but I won't take time to mention. And while you're unplugged, you might go on a long way. Well, let's start with this one. While you're unplugged, you may just deconnect long enough to reconnect with God's heart. Let me show you how to do this. Take a Jesus story. I like to do this a lot. What's his heart like? Pick a miracle. Jesus, they run out of wine. Fix it. Mom, hush. Wouldn't you like to say that sometime to your mom, your in-laws, to your boss? Hush, hush. Now watch him saying hush. He holds out his hand, but it's not my time. Get those water jars. What? Huh? Water jars? Fill them to the top. He creates wine. Party's saved. Now, how do you think Jesus responded to that? Puts his hands, on his shoulders, rubs his knuckles across. Did you guys see that? That's pretty good, wasn't it? You think he did that? Double thumbs up. I saved the party. No, I'm watching. Now, what's Jesus do? I know what he does. He kind of steps over there and goes and gets a glass of wine. Just kind of, something I do. I'm gentle and humble of heart, he says. Sometimes it's time just to take a long, slow walk for the next 15 minutes, experience the wonders of the desert. You may decide to read the poem Love 3, one of Glenn's favorites I put inside the insert. Take 10 minutes. Just read a psalm or two. Psalms connect us with God's heart. Take 5 minutes and read a proverb or two. Proverbs tell us how to get along with people. Take 10 minutes and just think about the religious resume you've been trying to build and say, I am sick and tired of trying to get Jesus to like me by how I behave. I want to enjoy my position in the heavenlies. Sit by the mall. Imagine what's going on through people's lives. And finally, revel in what God thinks of you when you think up in the morning, when you wake up. What do you think God thinks about you when you wake up? I know where many of us think. It goes like this. I'm not a very good person. I don't think God likes me a lot. I guess if I were a better person, I'd do this, that, and the other. I think God's kind of disappointed in how my life has turned out. And when you awaken in the morning, you might say something like this, I'm hearing God say, I'm so disappointed in you. Is that what he says when you wake up? Maybe you feel like God's always criticizing you because you never measure up. You haven't done enough good things. And maybe you wake up and it's kind of like God says to you, oh, great, Roger's up again. I wonder what trouble he's going to get into this afternoon. Is that what he's saying? Some of us feel so distant from God. God couldn't like us. We'd have to say, God doesn't even notice when I wake up. But what's the gospel truth? Not performance-based. Total grace. I'll tell you what he does. Here's mama in the kitchen, grandmama in the kitchen, baby sleeping down the hall in the bedroom. They got the Radio Shack, a little walkie-talkie, so when baby wakes up, we'll all know it, and we can go take care of baby. And what's mama thinking? You know what mama's thinking? Oh, dear God, let that child sleep. I'm so tired. I don't have to fiddle with that child. Just another 20 minutes of that child just stays asleep. What's grandma thinking? Oh, boy, child's going to wake up. I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to have a good time. And the walkie-talkie in the kitchen starts a-crying. And what's grandma do? She runs down the hall. Oh, boy. She slides that baby into her arms. And what does she say? I'm so glad you're awake. We're going to have the best time together today. I'm so glad you're up. Now, can I read you a verse that completely supports what I just told you God says when you wake up? This is what he wants us to know when we wake up in the morning. Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 17. The Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save. He will take great delight in you. I'm so glad you're up. We're going to have fun today. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. Does that sound like the party the Father gave to the prodigal son? It's the same party he wants to give us all every single morning. He's awake. She's awake. I'm going to sing because I'm going to get to spend the day with him today. Isn't that a beautiful thought? So let's drop all this performance-based stuff we learned as children and from others, and by faith move into the grace of our position in Christ. And here, if you don't do anything else I've said this morning, you ought to do this. When you wake up in the morning, stick your toes out from underneath the covers. You look up and say, hey, God, you're singing because I'm awake. Let's do that. We're going to have a great day together. and then get up and enjoy the day. Well, let's stand together and pray, please. Father, I pray that you would give us a deeper understanding of what grace really means. You'd move us away from our legalistic thoughts and attitudes towards ourselves and others. And Father, I pray that we would really enjoy your heart. We'd unplug to move into your heart and have a great time there. I thank you for being such a wonderful, loving Father. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, have a good week. God bless us. We'll see you again next Sunday, and we're dismissed.